How would you describe Courtney?
Evil, an evil monster.
Without a doubt, my life will never be the same.
He's probably saying that he didn't actually murder somebody, but he did, whether he wants to admit it or not.
I respectfully decline the answer pursuant to my Fifth Amendment right.
What more of a heinous criminal act can you have than depriving somebody of the medicine that they need to stay alive? It's like slowly strangling a person to death.
How's Robert holding up?
And it was over 4,200 patients and more than 98,000 prescriptions.
When you explain to people how your dad died, what do you say? Do you say it's the cancer?
Cancer didn't kill him. Robert Courtney killed him.
He probably has done more harm with a medical jacket on than anybody I know.
He wants to get out because of good behavior. He made the decision to dilute medication.
Why can't he just serve his time?
Pharmacist Robert Courtney pleads guilty to diluting
We have
cancer
serial killers that people can understand. I mean, that's what this man is. He was a serial killer. He did it for money. He did it for greed.
How could you let this man go home?
Kansas City is America's heartland. The self-proclaimed City of Fountains. It's a city with pride and soul. But there's also another side.
Shots fired.
We hear gunfire around here all the time.
Pointing a gun at people in the drive-thru.
A side with violence and hurt.
One homicide is too many. So am I happy with where we are? Absolutely not.
Kansas City's murder rate is one of the highest in the nation.
Gun violence needs to stop. You know, no one has the right to take a life of another person.
So if any city can tell you about violence and pain, maybe it's Kansas City.
Some way we got to stop this.
There is one crime that haunts thousands of families across this city, and it may make you rethink how you define violence. It involves a man in a white jacket. No gun or knife was involved. Thousands of families will tell you what he did is Kansas City's most sinister crime. Robert Courtney was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, and now he's walking out.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are we set? Tell me about your mom.
Okay, so my mom's name is Sherry Carrot.
Santana Cummings wonders what life could have been like if her mother's cancer medication was mixed by a different pharmacist.
That really kind of messes with you, messes with your head, because you have the what ifs start creeping in. Like, my life would be so different if she would have, maybe got those, treatments and they would have been the full dose. Maybe she would be here today.
Sherry was diagnosed with cancer when she was just 32 years old. She died 1 year later.
In that year span, I watched her go from, a full-figured woman to a skeleton. Her eyes were sunken. She was tired all the time. I was 11, and I did watch her, die in front of me. And that was traumatic all on its own.
What happened to Santana's mother came into focus through an FBI investigation. It revealed Robert Courtney diluted life-saving medications for money.
He picked the perfect crime. He took advantage of them while they were sick. And I feel like he would go in and look these people in the eyes. He would speak to them while they're getting an IV drip with diluted medication. You knew exactly what you were doing to these people, and you were looking them in their eyes like, you're a monster.
Maybe Santana's life could have been different. Maybe her mother could have met her grandkids in person. Maybe this is Robert Courtney's legacy.
I'm one of thousands of people that feel this way. There are so many families that have been impacted, and I'm just like, how could you let this man go home? Especially when, you know, none of these people that were his victims, some of them are never coming home. A lot of them never came home. So it's pretty awful.
Let's go back to the mid-90s. A new cancer medication hit the market. It was called Gemzar. A local executive switched companies to sell it.
Okay, I'm Daryl Ashley. I'm retired from Lilly. At the time, I was a senior executive representative for the oncology business unit for Eli Lilly.
And so you interfaced and worked with doctors and nurses of cancer patients, correct?
Yes.
Gemzar works by killing any cells that are dividing, and cancer cells divide rapidly. Gemzar can be used alone or as part of a combination therapeutic. It was a treatment for cancers that had no hope.
It still wasn't a cure, but it gave people time and good time, and that's why I wanted to be a part of that drug.
Gemzar promised fewer side effects. It's something Daryl Ashley would ask about in the doctor's office.
And my question was, what did they have before? How did they tolerate it? You know, how are they tolerating it now with Gemzar, and what are you using with Gemzar?
Daryl Ashley says the nurses and patients reported they were tolerating it well, just like all the prior treatments, and that didn't make sense.
I knew that you were supposed to lose your hair, not just a thinning, but you're supposed to lose your hair. They're supposed to get sick. That's how some of these new antiemetics were developed and designed specifically for that drug, and no one was getting sick. Both of those always stuck in the back of my mind.
The results were too good to be true. And then there was something else.
The nurse would say, you should be excited because we're using so much of your drug.
But the numbers didn't add up, and the price was amazing. It looked like Courtney was giving patients such a deal, he was actually losing money.
We're selling the drug for $73 a vial, and he's charging you $63 per vial, and he's providing the tubing, the saline, that includes everything. It's like, there's something wrong here.
So what was going on inside Research Tower?
I started then, what if? What if what everybody's saying is true?
He eventually voiced his suspicions to nurses inside Dr. Verda Hunter's oncology office.
And I said, guys, based on what you're telling me and the information I'm getting from my company, he may be diluting. I said, this is only speculation, but you know, lack of toxicities, the price, everything, he may be diluting.
If Ashley was right, something was deadly wrong. If he's wrong, he just hurt an innocent man's career.
So then that night, Dr. Hunter called I have a home office, called me and said, what did you tell my nurses? And I repeated everything. And there was dead silence on the phone. She said, okay, thank you.
Here's what happened next. Daryl Ashley's hunch was taken seriously. Dr. Verda Hunter does her own investigation. She gets samples tested. It's not what she ordered. They appear to be diluted. She goes to the FBI.
I really didn't think that this was something that was done intentionally.
Melissa Osborne is a retired FBI special agent. She's also a pharmacist and provided key strategy in the Robert Courtney investigation.
I thought that this could have been an error on the pharmacist or a mistake.
The FBI set up a sting. Osborne and the team had Dr. Hunter reach out to get more medicine. Up until this moment, Dr. Hunter stopped using Robert Courtney after that phone call with Daryl Ashley.
We were able to place an order for fictitious patients for these medications, and we flew them directly to the FDA lab to be tested within 24 hours. When we got it 24 hours later, all of the covert purchases had anywhere from, I think, about around 28-30% down to almost 0%, just a mere trace, basically nothing. And what I can tell you, that was a really OMG moment, because at that time we knew, like, somebody's doing this, and they're doing it intentionally.
Robert Courtney's pharmacy at Research Tower was raided and shut down. The case became public.
It wasn't for a doctor named Verda Hunter. She talked to the salesman from Eli Lilly.
That August 23rd indictment accused Courtney of intentionally and fraudulently diluting those two drugs here on 14 separate occasions.
State inspectors are inside right now giving it a thorough going over.
In fact, they might want to speak.
Suddenly, families across Kansas City realized they might be connected to the case everyone was talking about.
Well, pissed off. I mean, here I have a young daughter who passed away at 23, who had got past cancer once, was willing to do whatever it took to be alive and go forward, and to find out that maybe somebody decided on their own not to give her the chance that she was willing to fight for money. I mean, how much different is it than just walking up to a gun and shooting her?
Osborne was asked to personally go to Washington, D.C. to explain the investigation. And on that day, the world changed.
I was in Washington, D.C. with my boss and the special agent in charge of the Kansas City office when everything broke loose on 9/11. Because at that time, before those planes hit the Pentagon and the Twin Towers, the Robert Courtney case was the #1 case, an investigation for the FBI.
That's why the Robert Courtney case faded quickly from national headlines. But in Kansas City, it was a media frenzy.
How's Robert holding up?
If anything comes out from this continuing investigation.
Have any comments about this plea agreement?
When you heard Mr. Courtney say what he said, what went through your head?
As local journalists uncovered who could do this, it was stunning.
It's like he's playing God, you know, he is just trying to make some money, but at the expense of so many lives.
All of Kansas City suddenly learned about a quiet pharmacist named Robert Courtney. He graduated from UMKC in 1975. He was a deacon in his Northland church, the son of a preacher, a trusted professional with community ties, married with children, a family man. He lived in a nice, quiet house in the suburbs. He looked picture perfect.
Who do we trust? Nobody. Can't trust the pharmacy, you might as well. I hope he'll have a long life of intense agony without any medication. Nasty me, but nasty, nasty him.
This is Frank Carey from the FBI in Kansas City, 816.
The FBI set up a hotline for patients and doctors. It was a public health crisis and criminal investigation all at once. Thousands of patients had no answers. What did they get? The FBI named the investigation Diluted Trust. Old news footage documents Courtney being shuttled from prison to court hearings in a dark SUV. No cameras are allowed in federal courtrooms, so Kansas City watched the case unfold through court sketches. And then, a plea deal.
Mr. Courtney and his corporation have now pleaded guilty to all 20 felony counts that were contained in the federal grand jury indictment last August.
It was 30 years, but explained as much more.
Mr. Courtney, as he said in court, is now 49 years old. He will effectively have a life sentence to serve.
Or so they thought. In hindsight, we now know it's no life sentence. Courtney is walking out of prison after 22 years. And we'll get back to that.
The guy's a heinous killer.
Old footage shows families were outraged.
Shocking, just shocking, just to
think, you know, that we didn't even have a chance, that he robbed us. And it's just unbelievable.
They had the man for 180 years to begin with, and then they started this flea bargain. Now, it's not nice to bury my wife every time this thing comes up. But it just brings back too many memories.
Courtney's plea deal came with a catch. He had to admit everything, every medication he diluted. It was bigger than anyone ever suspected.
He really never thought that he would be caught. I think his only remorse was that he was caught.
Remember, Melissa Osborne is also a pharmacist, so she was in charge of questioning Courtney. They wanted to know what was diluted and why.
As we continued to interview Robert Courtney, he initially admitted that he had diluted these medications for a small number of patients for several months because he had made a pledge to his church for $1 million, and he also had a very high tax bill and he needed a little bit of extra money. Well, you know, when we hear that, we're like, there's no way somebody goes from doing things the right way to all of a sudden doing them the wrong way. So we do keep interviewing him. He continues to have polygraphs, and as we keep going at him, it gets farther and farther away. He'd been doing it longer and longer, because we knew there was just no way you just did it this one time and that was it. It was too elaborate and too heinous.
Federal investigators never learned who got half doses or maybe nothing at all. Courtney didn't keep records. For patients, their medicine remained a mystery. Other agents followed the money. Courtney's bank accounts and investments revealed $19 million. In 2024, that would be the equivalent of $33 million. Confirmation of how many drugs were diluted and how long this scheme lasted.
We're looking at greed because there's a lot of money involved in these medications, and he agreed with that. But then there were some medications that he actually tampered with that were like $5.
In the end, Courtney admitted to diluting 72 medications for over 4,200 patients, affecting more than 98,000 prescriptions. It wasn't just cancer medication. It was prescriptions for fertility treatments, diabetes, AIDS, even eye drops.
It was gut-wrenching work, but I'm glad we stopped him, and I do believe that it was a real public safety issue.
Osborne went through a spreadsheet of every drug Courtney filled. Did he remember the first time he diluted that medication? Did he remember the last time? Most of the time, Courtney couldn't remember details because it was just business as usual diluting a patient's medicine. But one time he did, because Courtney didn't just dilute the medicine of strangers, he did it to people he personally knew.
And he goes, yes. And he basically, and we were like, okay, why? He says, oh, because it was for the wife of a friend of mine. Well, he didn't have any reaction, but all of us around the table, including his attorneys, it was almost like the blood just went out of their face, and you know, we all just got sick from it. He did not really react at all.
Osborne says Courtney's demeanor never changed as days rolled by.
And even when he's in the orange jumpsuit in Lansing prison, he still exuded an arrogance. It wasn't like, you know, you would think that when you're caught like this, you would almost shrivel in upon yourself. No, he wasn't like that at all. And when I looked him in the eye, and the whole time that I was spent time with him, I saw a monster. That's what I saw.
Yeah, Michael Ketchmark.
Attorney Mike Ketchmark also interviewed Courtney in prison. It was for a civil deposition. It's one of the odder stories we heard about Robert Courtney.
I met him, and he's in handcuffs, and he's in the prison cell.
Some lawsuits in there.
Ketchmark, shown here in old video, represented hundreds of families in civil cases where they sued Robert Courtney for injuries and wrongful death. Courtney actually asked Ketchmark for a small favor.
And I walked in, and he smiled at me, and and asked me if there's any way I could consider getting him a Coke, a Coca-Cola. And I was stunned. And I started asking him questions, and he said, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth. Wouldn't answer any questions, and when I got up to leave, he said, hey, nothing personal, because I'm just doing what my lawyers told me. And it was a level of creepiness to it.
What did you think of Robert Courtney?
I tried not to think a lot about him because he was so evil and was such an evil person. He's a sociopath, he's a psychopath. And it scared me to think that there's people like him who exist in our world.
Ketchmark remembers all the families he represented. Georgia Hayes is one of them. Her case is the only one that went to trial.
Something is not right.
In October of 2002, Georgia Hayes went to trial.
Georgia Hayes doesn't need the hope and prayers from Courtney's defense lawyer. She needed her 27 doses of chemotherapy when she was fighting for her life.
Georgia was a mother and wife. She had cancer. Her doctor was Verda Hunter. Her pharmacist was Robert Courtney.
Without a doubt, my life will never be the same.
Georgia was front and center as hundreds of patients sued Robert Courtney and pharmaceutical companies for injury and wrongful death.
New details tonight in the federal case against pharmacist Robert Courtney.
My husband and I were watching TV, and there was a little blurb about a pharmacist who had diluted chemotherapy drugs. And when they told the story, it hit me. I had to have been one of those patients, because all of a sudden everything that had happened in the past year was explained. And it was truly worse than finding out you have cancer. It's like being hit in the stomach with a bowling ball.
And that was the same feeling for hundreds, even thousands of families across Kansas City. They believed Robert Courtney diluted their medication. They questioned if cancer outcomes could have been different. By 2002, some patients had died from cancer, where treatments didn't work. But remember, Courtney didn't keep records, so no one knew for sure. Georgia Hayes had some proof. You see, Georgia never got sick or had major side effects when Robert Courtney mixed her medicine. But one time, Georgia had her chemotherapy treatment somewhere else. It was a county hospital in Harrisonville, Missouri. Georgia suddenly lost her hair.
It was falling out in the sink as I was washing my hair in clumps, and I remember a nurse walking in, a little startled, seeing all this hair everywhere, and I remember telling her that she shouldn't drink the water.
Georgia testified in court about openly questioning doctors.
And I was afraid, as I was calling them, I was afraid to accuse someone of not giving me enough chemo, so I erred on the side of caution and said, did the hospital give me too much chemo? But my husband and I had discussed, something is not right.
The trial included gut-wrenching testimony from medical experts.
Did Robert Courtney's dilution of these drugs keep Georgia Hayes from receiving proper treatment for her cancer?
Yes.
Doctors explained Georgia likely missed her best chance to beat cancer. It had spread.
To this day, and probably forever, will wonder, what if I'd gotten what I should have gotten?
The trial included testimony of patients too sick to testify in person. One patient had treatments side by side with Georgia. The women clearly became friends and discussed the impact of watered-down medication.
My daughter is older, and she has at least lived an entire life with me. I've gotten to raise her. Georgia's daughter is still in high school, and there's an awful lot of living she hasn't taught her about.
Georgia's teenage daughter, Mackenzie, took the stand too. She talked about the moments her mom would likely miss.
To see me graduate, get married, have a kid.
Georgia won a $2.2 billion verdict.
As the judge read the juror's decision, Georgia Hayes hugged her attorneys.
As she left the courtroom, every juror gave her a hug.
We've said, what, $2 billion that her life is worth? Yeah, it is, and it probably is more.
The verdict was largely symbolic because the federal government had seized Courtney's assets. Georgia knew that. She openly said her victory was never about the money.
Though we'll probably never see a dime from the verdict, I am ecstatic that justice has prevailed and the precedent is set for this to never happen to anyone else again.
Georgia died a few years after the trial. She did make it to Mackenzie's graduation, but missed the other big moments in her life. Mackenzie recently shared these thoughts in writing. I had a lot of difficulty wrapping my head around how this could happen, how someone could value money over a human life. I remember believing that my mother had been murdered when she was still alive. Courtney's ultimate judgment will come. I'm only asking that what was ordered be carried out in its entirety. Mackenzie and other families have been down this road twice, learning Robert Courtney will be released from prison early. The first notification came in 2020. In July 2020, cities across the country were largely shut down because of COVID-19. Everyone was looking for solutions on how to socially distance people. Workers, students, even prisoners. The Bureau of Prisons wanted to release nonviolent offenders and those perceived to be low risk. Robert Courtney made the list.
Good heavens. You know, how could he not be a danger?
Even in the middle of a global pandemic, Marge Vermillion invited us in her home to talk about her husband, Byron. Byron was a dressmaker. He had just retired when he learned he had lung cancer. Even worse, Robert Courtney was his pharmacist.
Is he finished with his murdering? No, I look at him as a very dangerous person, and the 30 years I thought was a gift to him. He should have spent the rest of his life in prison.
A firestorm erupted on social media as the public became aware.
Are you kidding? He's a monster.
The guy is pretty much a serial killer.
Let's just go ahead and let all the mass murderers out because of COVID. But by God, those kids better be in school come fall. Social distancing and disinfecting is good enough for our children, but not for murderers?
Others questioned if perhaps Robert Courtney's privilege was showing.
It pays to be white, rich, and have good friends no matter the crime.
Even Kansas City's mayor, Quentin Lucas, questioned it on Twitter.
I could only imagine the difference between Robert Courtney and the thousands locked up for drug offenses, still serving almost full sentences. Embarrassing. Courtney misled 4,000 plus sick and dying cancer patients and profited in the millions. Sad how humane we are only to some.
At the last minute, public outrage and pressure from politicians worked. The release was blocked. Robert Courtney has also directly appealed to a judge to release him. He actually represented himself in court and filed this paperwork, so these are his unfiltered words and thoughts. Courtney argues he's changed. He's now reformed, and because of that, 30 years is now too long. On the first page, he quotes a Bible scripture and Abraham Lincoln about the importance of mercy. Courtney acknowledged his crimes, but argued he's older and no longer a risk. He's had health problems, a stroke, 3 heart attacks, and suffers from internal bleeding. He's also had cancer. He points out he's been a good inmate and even turned fellow prisoners in who broke the rules. Courtney writes about leading singing and worship inside the prison chapel. There's also another really important piece in this letter. Courtney encouraged a judge to look at the newly passed First Step Act. It allows the early release of inmates. That will become important later. The judge denied the motion. For families, it was over. Robert Courtney remained in prison, now in Littleton, Colorado, serving a 30-year sentence they never fully agreed with. But he wasn't being let out for compassion or good behavior. And by this point, Kansas City knows it's not just 34 patients who received diluted medicine, it's more than 4,000 people. Years roll by. Then fast forward to 2024 when the Bureau of Prisons notifies victims' families of two new decisions. The first is that Courtney has been approved to go to a halfway house in Springfield, Missouri. The second was even worse. Courtney was granted home confinement. When families push for an explanation, they are told it's due to the First Step Act. That's the same act Courtney wrote about years ago.
Why can't he just serve his time? Why is he being allowed to participate in the First Step Act?
The First Step Act is a relatively new criminal reform bill. It allows federal inmates to earn time credits for good behavior. But there's a catch. The law says some prisoners won't be eligible if they are convicted of violent crimes. But that's not the case with Robert Courtney's 20 convictions: tampering with consumer products, adulterating drugs, and mislabeling drugs.
Do you think it's appropriate for him to get out under the First Steps Act?
No, he should not be released on the First Step Act.
Missouri Representative Emanuel Cleaver was a strong supporter of the First Step Act. So was every Missouri and Kansas senator and representative. They all voted yes. It was signed into law by President Trump on December 20th, 2018.
And I still support that. If it came to a vote next week, I'd vote for it again. However, I'm not sure at all that I can put Mr. Courtney in the category of somebody who should benefit from the First Step Act. I just cannot accept that, and I can guarantee you that 95% of the men and women who voted for this would be with me on this issue.
The goal of the First Step Act is to address mass incarceration by releasing nonviolent prisoners early and to home confinement. On paper, Robert Courtney tampered with medicine.
But they don't see that the same as hitting somebody with a bat or stabbing somebody. And so I think that's where the common sense must come in. That's violence.
Families across Kansas City say what they experienced was a violent crime.
We shouldn't even be having, this discussion right now. He should be serving his full time in prison, if not facing murder charges.
When you explain to people how your dad died, what do you say? Do you say it's the cancer?
The cancer didn't kill him. Robert Courtney killed him.
Kat Duncan describes her dad, Harry Duncan, as a big teddy bear. He had cancer, but doctors were confident he would beat it.
It was so weird to see him get small,
Time has not healed her family's wounds or softened her heart towards Robert Courtney.
I hate him, okay? I'm just gonna be honest, I hate him, I know you're not supposed to, and I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, but I hate him. And I know you're supposed to forgive people. You don't have to forget, but you can forgive. It's not gonna happen.
The family of Martha Nix also struggles with the idea of Robert Courtney being released early for good behavior. Here's granddaughter Mindy.
He wants to get out because of good behavior. He made the decision to dilute medication. He made that decision out of greed instead of thinking about people's lives.
Martha suffered from bone cancer. It was a slow and painful death.
Evil. An evil monster.
What do you think he should have been charged with?
He should have been charged with murder. I say that my grandma died because of Robert Courtney's heinous crime.
There's now a new push for murder charges.
How did we get here to where you and I are now having this conversation?
I think it's one of the problems with our judicial system is that 30 years can seem like forever, right?
Attorney Mike Ketchmark says no one expected Robert Courtney to actually walk out of prison. It wasn't top of mind until now.
When he was sentenced, I think everyone had hoped that he would spend the rest of his life in jail, and it's really where he belongs. And as I talk to people about it, it's horrible for them. It has brought all of the pain and the anguish and the immense, I mean, you can't even imagine what these people are going through.
Ketchmark has high praise for federal investigators and prosecutors who solved this, and explains there was pressure to not just get a conviction, but get to the truth.
Let's remember that even if we had taken Mr. Courtney to trial and secured his convictions on all 20 counts, he could have gone to prison with his secrets.
He believes murder charges are still appropriate.
I'm calling upon the system to find a solution, because he belongs in prison. I get it, it's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the judicial system and a prosecutor's office to say charge him, because they might not be able to convict him.
Almost everyone agrees some people died from what happened. After all, this affected more than 4,000 patients. But with murder, you need specific victims and go beyond reasonable doubt.
Well, let a jury decide that. Let a jury decide that. And because I can't imagine any jury who looking at this situation like this who's going to do anything other than realize what he did was he committed murder.
Courtney was convicted in federal court. There's an entirely different legal system that could address this case. Missouri state courts, specifically Jackson County, where Courtney diluted medicines like chemotherapy. There's no statute of limitations on murder charges. And it is something the FBI considered.
I know that a lot of people in Kansas City really didn't like that there was a plea agreement, and I totally understand. A lot of people wanted us to charge him with murder, which I wish we could have found a way. And I know the attorneys that worked the case brought in many, many experts. We evaluated that, and it would have been nearly impossible to meet the burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt for each and every patient.
The push for murder charges is back as families realize Courtney is leaving federal prison. Santana Cummings has started a change.org petition to block Courtney's release. The comments reflect how painful Courtney's release will be for some families.
This man is the reason my grandfather died of lung cancer. No sentence is long enough for what he did. But early release from prison, even to a halfway house, is unfathomable.
I was a hospice nurse and had to care for some of his victims.
My friend Becky was a victim of this monster. She died so young and had 3 boys to raise. He needs to rot in prison.
Santana openly discusses her loss and what her mother must have gone through, a young mother with cancer.
It's heartbreaking, so I can only imagine, what was going through her mind. I feel like she fought as long and as hard as she could, and then she was gone.
Families tell stories of personally thanking Robert Courtney because they thought he was curing their loved ones. Today they know he wasn't, and they are left with disgust for Courtney and the system that's letting him out.
I think he should be sitting in a prison cell for the rest of his life. I think they should take pictures of every victim he hurt or killed and just line them up on the ceilings, on the walls, so he has to face all those people looking at him every day.
Kat Duncan keeps her father close. He's never far from her or her memories. Mindy Nix took us to visit her grandmother. What do you think she would think of all of this with Courtney getting out?
She would be upset because she really believed in treating others fairly, and he did not treat others fairly. He was so centered on himself. She would have a very hard time with this.
Families hope for justice, but have faith in a higher power.
We aren't the ones that will judge him at the ultimate time that his time comes. So his judgment will come the day that he meets the Lord.
There are more than 4,000 families haunted by what Robert Courtney did. They'll never have answers to the biggest question in this case: would full doses of medicine have made a difference? This remains a crime investigators struggle to define. Did a man in a white jacket mislabel drugs? Or was this something else? Here in Kansas City, families will never forget Robert Courtney's legacy. The Heartland remains heartbroken.